All right. Hello, everyone. The clock strikes 5 afternoon, and we're ready. So, welcome. Hello. Welcome to Thursday. It's like Friday, only a day before. We're getting started today with some video in Premiere. So I'll be telling you sort of the basics of how to use Premiere. We'll get into some even more basic kind of fundamentals of how video works before that. Before I begin, does anyone have any questions about anything? Anybody have any questions about the midterm or the final? I did get a couple of questions over email even after my explanation on Thursday or Tuesday. So just any last questions? I guess real quickly, probably we've all been maybe thinking or not thinking about the mask mandate getting lifted in a couple of weeks. I don't feel like I've really had a chance to kind of like fully process that just because it seems like kind of a big deal. I guess I would say, in particular, if there's anything that you want me to do or anything that I can do to help you, no matter what your sort of position or inclination is, feel free to send me an email and let me know what your thoughts are, because I definitely want to make sure that, we kind of just maintain a level of respect and comfort for everyone. So that's, it's kind of why I'm here. So, yeah. So if you have maybe like any kind of special concerns in any direction, just let me know. And I'll start sort of thinking more about, just how that's going to work. So I guess if I could think about one good thing that might happen is I could bring in like a huge bucket full of cookies at the end of the semester. That would be like my little teacher dream. But don't worry, if it doesn't work, it won't work. I'm just going to kind of continue to dream about that. So anyway, video, I want to point out to you, I guess, the sort of first thing that we're going to talk about when we talk about video. I think that it's safe to say that we all look at a ton of video on these devices. I know for sure this is like my primary TV watching device. I actually don't have a traditional television. And I think a lot of people now, are sort of working off of small players like the Roku or basically like, small computers. And so when we think about video, particularly within this platform, I know a lot of us are looking at YouTube, and certainly YouTube has a quality setting on it. So we're going to think a little bit about this sort of idea of a quality setting. And you can see here, this is not every video on YouTube has such a range of quality. Sometimes, like if you look at video that's from a major broadcast source, like, I don't know if anybody watches late night videos, but those are, from a major broadcasting network, which a network is this thing that, I'm being a little cheeky right now, a network is this thing that they used to have when they had TV. But yeah, basically, in those, you're going to see usually like high quality, and it'll be high quality and then maybe less great quality. And here we have, 10p HD. So 1080p is really like the kind of de facto standard for HD video at the moment. One of the best ways that you can probably physically look at a lot of different types of HD standards and see how different they look. You can certainly look at different quality modes on your own laptop, but you can also really just like go to a store where they have screens, and you'll see that some of the screens are capable of 8K, some of the screens are only capable of 1080p, and some of the screens are only maybe even capable of 720p. That's kind of like an older, more low quality standard that we used to call standard def. So So basically, I mean, this quality mode, all these quality terms that we're using now, or that you might see when you go shopping for a screen, like 4K, 8K, 1080p, 720p, every single one of those refers to the number of pixels in the frame. And so if we look over here, this is a really great, there's a link to this on the course website right here. This is a really great explanation of what those pixel sizes are and what they look like. So in this class, sort of the magic, oh. I thought it was like the piano for a second, and I was like, oh my God. Okay, so that was awesome. So in this class, 1080 HD is sort of like the magic word for us. Everything that we're going to be producing that's in video and all of the clips that we're going to be using are in that resolution. And you can think of it as a resolution. And so 1080p is basically 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels. I don't need to write that on the board because it's not something that I think we're going to be really thinking about those specific numbers, but that's basically what it corresponds to. So slightly more high quality would be the 4K standard. 4K looks beautiful. I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't do 4K if you have a really nice computer. If you're using even just like a late model MacBook Pro, which is like a pretty decent computer, or at least a pretty decent computer by our sort of like everyday standards, you could potentially run into trouble like trying to render 4K. It's just kind of it's a lot of pixels. And outside of that, my sort of like go-to low quality standard is this 720 HD. That's actually the lowest number of pixels you can have and still have it be considered HD. So that is 720 by 480 pixels. And so you can see that they go even higher into 8K, which is Ultra HD, and into the sort of 8K, and even in 12K is a thing now. Those are getting into the sort of territories where you would really have to have like a dedicated graphics workstation in order to process video of any length. I can process like a 1 minute 4K video on my laptop, and it takes about a half hour, 45 minutes. So I don't want to make anybody wait that long, so we're going to go with 1080. Also, I think that despite 4K being kind of on the move, as maybe it will eventually take over 1080p as the standard, but we're really not there yet. 1080p is still considered the sort of standard for HD video. So if you're uploading to like sharing sites like Vimeo or YouTube, uploading them in 1080 is what is going to be expected. Okay, so this is one of the things that leads to the file size of a video. So we've got like this being the smallest pixel size, slightly larger pixel size, and so on and so forth. And so, common sense would just tell you, based on our experience with Photoshop, that this file is going to be the smallest in file size. This file is going to be slightly larger, so on and so forth. There's another a sort of parameter that contributes to the file size of a video, and that is the frames per second. And so when we work with HD video, I'm going to write this on the board for those of you in the room, and I'll tell you what I'm writing on the board for those of you not in the room. This is kind of the standard frame rate for video. Now, I hear some of you gamers out there that are like, 30 frames a second. That's what I wrote on the board, was 30 frames a second. That's nothing. And yeah, definitely, you can get, if you're playing, a first-person shooter or some sort of like, okay, confession time. Sometimes I play this game called Elder Scrolls. It's kind of addictive. But yeah, like, if you're playing one of those games, odds are you have probably a frame rate between 60 and 120 frames a second. The reason why video hasn't really caught up is that video, in a lot of ways, has a visual quality that's comparing itself to cinema. And what do I mean by cinema? I mean like actual movie film with movie projectors, which is, all the stuff used to be done on film. And when television and movies were done on film, the standard was 23 frames a second. So actually having that extra 7 frames a second makes it considered HD. Do I think that a much higher frame rate would become standard in the future, like maybe 60 frames a second? Well, televisions and screens are certainly capable of that, right? I think that there's actually a fair amount of debate in the sort of film and movie world about the visual look of a very high frame rate, that it tends to kind of sharpen things in a way that people actually don't like, directors and stuff. So it's kind of an interesting area of to think about, could something that's technically not as good actually look better for certain purposes? Who knows? We'll just have to see where it goes in the next 20 years. But if I were to put my money on it, I would say probably a higher frame rate is going to end up taking over. Because in general, technological standards get faster and more pixels and all, just in general more. So if you're in the gaming world, you're really probably used to looking at a significantly higher frame rate than you are in your sort of TV watching world. We are sort of really going to locate ourselves in this video sort of TV watching online video world, and the standard for that, just to be clear, is 30 frames a second. So that's what's considered HD video. So if we want to just crack open Premiere, that would be great. Let's do that. We're going to have several Premiere demos, so we're going to spend at least 3 class periods looking at Premiere. Maybe more if we need it. I can compress this lecture. And then y'all will be taking the midterm exam. You may notice that you have a project right now. That project is called Remix Video. You may also notice that because I'm not a monster, that project is due after spring break. And it's not right after spring break. You have at least 4 or 5 days if you completely ignored it over spring break, which I wouldn't fault you if you did. So yeah, that project is going to be coming due the week after spring break as we sort of move into 3D stuff. So just sort of an orientation with where we're going. Let's go ahead and crack open Premiere. So I have some things to show you that are kind of outside of Premiere. I have what in the video making world we call assets. Assets basically include anything that you're going to put in your video, which could be like video clips, images, sound, text files even, if you wanted to have text files for your credits or something. There are lots and lots of different file formats that you can put into a video. Hello. I just opened it like 10 minutes ago. Let's see. Come on. Dun, dun, dun. Well, it does seem to be taking its sweet time, which is a little curious because I had it open earlier this morning. I'm guessing it's just Adobe probably catching up with one of its updates. Okay, so when you open up Premiere, the first thing that we are going to do is we're going to make a new project. And it's usually, particularly when you're working with video, it's a really good idea to actually go through these first steps of giving it a name, like my stupid project. And go ahead and point to the location where you want that project folder to exist. So good places to have your project folder are your hard drive anywhere on your hard drive. You can tell it's your hard drive if you just go to maybe boot camp. You might have it there. You might also just put it on your desktop. If you have your Mac set up to synchronize with the cloud, where everything is mirrored onto the cloud, you would want to definitely ask one of the TAs about making special efforts to put this folder on your hard drive. And the reason is because videos have a pretty high file size, right? And it takes time to move them from one place to another. So if you're asking a network connection to constantly be moving video data up and down off the cloud, unless you have like a wired, I work in the computer science building kind of connection, you are going to be hurting. It's going to be slow. Premiere might even lock up. It will probably say it can't find your files. All of those things. So if you've been mirroring your computer to the cloud, that's your choice, whatever. Like, that's the thing you can do. But for video specifically, it is not a good idea. So be sure to ask one of the TAs for help on sort of navigating to a local folder. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in this location that I already have for it, which is right here. So I'm going to put it in this folder called video, which is somewhere on my desktop. And it's also really important with Premiere and with video editing software in general that you know where your stuff is. And I'm going to talk probably like that. That's going to be like the broken record sort of thing for this unit, is that you really do need to know where your stuff is. So we found a folder. We clicked OK. And here we are. We're in the sort of generic, basically nothing happening in our working environment yet. If you are new to Premiere, you might want to, or maybe you've been using Premiere for a long time for something else, you might want to navigate to Window Workspaces and choose the Editing Workspace. That's the one that I'm going to be working in for this demo. So if things are not looking familiar to you, like if you don't have these 4 windows in a somewhat similar layout, you definitely should consider shifting to the Editing Workspace. We may use other workspaces at some point if we get that far. Specifically, we might use the Effects Workspace. So at this point, we have literally nothing. We just have like an empty container, and it says up here, it's got a directory path, and it says My Stupid Project, Premiere Project. So what we really need to do to kind of like activate our project is to populate it with some assets. So there's 2 ways you can do that. One way is to navigate to a folder with some assets. Oh, look, I just happen to have a folder with some assets. Here's a bunch of videos that I kind of randomly provide for you, including some videos that I just made for myself of those cats falling all over the place. I made some variations of that. So this is basically the list of videos that you see if you go to sample practice videos. Make sure that you click on the link. And you'll see just kind of a bunch of HD videos. Okay? So now you may be asking yourself, do I have to use these videos? No, I guess not. These videos are sort of pre-selected so that they're the right quality and the right settings, so that they will definitely work in your project. If you're getting videos from the internet, like a good thing to Google maybe is, it's sort of not 100% legal, so I'm just going to tell you how to Google it. If you Google YouTube to MP4, you may find several sites that allow you to type in the URL of a YouTube video and get back a fully high-quality MP4 video. So those are all sort of options. But the bottom line is, if you're thinking about using other videos in your project, just make extra double sure that they are 1080p, that quality mode If you have all of your assets being in the same quality mode, it will prevent you from having like videos where your video is giant and then tiny and then giant and then tiny. That's terrible. Nobody wants that. So yeah, so these are the videos, and I went ahead and downloaded them to my hard drive, and I stuck them in a folder, and then I added a couple of other videos. So there's sort of no penalty in terms of file size or performance to how many assets you have listed in your project. So I guess I'll go ahead and just I'll add these 4, and then I'll add the rest through another method. So if I just hit the Shift key to select a few of these, and then kind of bring Premiere up by hovering, and then if I bring them over to this part of the screen, which is my project browser, it will automatically import them quite nicely. And you can see it gives me some data about them. It gives me a little bit of data about their length. These are all the same length because I export them thusly. And they all have 30 frames a second. If you have an imbalance in frame rate, that's actually a little bit less important than the 1080 versus 4K versus 720 thing. You can kind of get around a frame rate that might be a little lower or higher. So we'll discuss that if it happens. So I'm going to go ahead and import my other things. And it just so happens that they're in here. Hit the Shift key. This might take a minute because we're importing quite a few. If you do have, by the way, if you do have a really poor internet connection, you might want to consider one of 2 things. Maybe downloading these videos while you're here on campus. The other thing I guess I could tell you is that if you divide the download into 4 or 5 separate downloads, it just increases the odds of partial success. So here's my videos. I've got a bunch of stuff, a bunch of different stuff. Some of it are like movie trailers with no sound. Some of them are sort of more atmospheric. I think I have a Sprinkles Factory video, which so amazing. Some videos from NASA of the sun. Let's say that I wanted to preview one of these videos before I stuck it into my whole shebang here. So I can double click it and check it out. It's going to come up in what's called my source browser. So the source browser is literally just sort of what it sounds like. It allows you to take a source video and then it allows you to watch it. So as I said, this is a very atmospheric video. So I think I'm just going to take this whole video because it's so sort of atmospheric. It looks like it might be a good kind of background video to lay other things on top of. I'm going to take this video, which it looks like it's about the right settings. It's got a slightly higher frame rate than I'm looking for, but that's okay. It kind of doesn't matter, to be honest. I mean, the only time mismatch in frame rate would be a real problem is if it's lower than maybe 20 frames a second, because it would look crappy. If it's too high, when you go to export the video, you can just basically resample it to 30. Okay, so now you can see what just happened there. I'm going to come out of that and just do it again. What happened when I clicked this on here and dragged it onto one of the tracks is that it activated something called a sequence. And so you can see it renamed this sequence Wind Blowing Trees and Grass. And then also we have, over here, we have the addition of something that is not a video clip. This is actually what is called the sequence. And so the sequence is basically just a fancy kind of way of talking about what is going to happen in this timeline. So everything that happens within the timeline is called the sequence. the reason they have a thing called a sequence is because in much larger projects, like if you were making a television show, you could have you could have more than one sequence. So you could have like a title sequence and an intro sequence. I actually do that when I'm building class videos. There's like the title with the music and stuff, and that's kind of its own thing that I just drag on. So it's just a way of making your video editing modular if you need chunks that you're going to repeat over and over again. It doesn't really apply to what we're doing here because we're just making a single sequence. But I wanted you all to be aware of that. So now that we're in the timeline, this is sort of where most of the magic is going to happen. You can take this bar on the bottom and you can zoom in and out of your clip. You can also hit the space bar, and that will activate the playhead. This is like pretty subtle motion here. You can see that in the program browser, this is called the program window, and it basically previews everything that is happening inside the timeline. So this browser previews the assets without any modification. And this browser is going to preview the entire timeline, like effects, edits, basically anything you do in the timeline. It's kind of killing me a little bit that I can't see the entire video in here, so I'm going to zoom to fit. And there, now the world is somehow better. So I can just move through here with the space bar and preview this clip. Now, you'll notice that when we are not on a video clip, we're looking at a black screen. That is sort of a 100% default of video editing. And it's actually a holdover from the days of film. So you might find that working with that black stuff actually makes sense. So sometimes it's not super uncommon to have, a fade to black. We'll do several of those. But a black screen is basically like, nothing. So if there's nothing on your timeline, that's what you'll see. A couple more things. You can also see that we have, it looks like, 2 other video tracks right now. So it looks like I should be able to bop this track up to other tracks. That's exciting. Or I could have it start on track 1. I think what we need is another video to sort of think about how we're going to put this together. So maybe play this one. I think this one's more exciting. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to drag this one over, and I'm going to position it in track 2. So also, you may notice that some of the clips in the clip browser are going to have sound along with them. Now, you could certainly use part of this sound. I have the sound turned way down. Let me change that. Wait for it. Thank you, doggy. So, okay, so, yeah. So this one is coming with some sort of rhythmic background sound. I certainly don't think that at this stage of the game we're going to even be dealing with sound. So I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of it. Of course, you'll notice that when I say, hey, I'm going to get rid of it, I select both, and they both select, right? They're somehow linked. So if I right-click or control-click the video, I can unlink it. And that then allows me to basically just address the sound separately, and I can get rid of it just by hitting delete. So let me show you again how the sort of tracks work. So you'll notice that we have this like wind blowing through the trees, and then we also have a sort of thermonuclear sun clip here. So if I come through here, Boom. You can see what has happened is that the second track has basically sort of, no pun intended, like eclipsed the first track. So that's what tracks do. They basically lay on top of each other. So if we wanted to, let's say, only have this display for a couple of minutes, we could cut this clip. So to cut clips, which is kind of like the very first step of this thing we call editing, you can get the cut tool, which is right here. It also responds to the C key. And just pick any point and make a cut. And then we would go back to the move tool, which is a V key on your keyboard. And we could do pretty much whatever we want with the rest of this. We could delete it. We could just move it over here, for example. We could literally do anything we want with it. And then what we have here is just a much shorter clip. And of course, we can also sort of think about ways that we could maybe even stack this further. So here's one more. Now, if I put it here, obviously it's going to cover up the sun at some point. Right? Or, you know, I could just be a lot more sort of concise, and I could put this all on one track. So what would that look like if it were all on one track? Well, I could put a cut here, and I can kind of line up the cut with where that is. So I can put a cut here and a cut here, and basically just kind of cut them all, you know, so they align with each other, and then pick up my move tool and start deleting. You might be thinking, oh my God, you're deleting that stuff. Yeah, you can totally drag it back over from the assets browser, and it's 100% intact. So whatever you delete or on the timeline is sort of like kind of meaningless. I mean, you're just deleting the instance on the timeline. So yeah, so here we could just kind of drag these to be all on one track. You'll notice that Premiere has pretty good snapping, which means that it doesn't allow you to have any space between the tracks, which is kind of nice. So here we've got sun, abandoned mall. And that's great. Whether you want to have things on one track or not is totally your own choice. Now, that being said, having things on different tracks, I'm just going to go back a few steps here. Having things on different tracks can afford you certain opportunities that you wouldn't get if things are cut and sitting right next to each other. So when things are sitting right next to each other, you don't really have the option to blend them or to do any sort of stuff like that. So I'm going to quickly, just to kind of prep for what we're about to do, I'm going to right-click this, and I'm going to go to, let's see, show clip keyframes, opacity, and I'm just going to make sure that that is checked. And for me, it is. Okay, so then I'm going to do one more thing to kind of prep. And that one thing is that my timeline here, it looks like I'm really only getting a very tiny preview of each of these tracks. So I can actually change that. I can give myself more room by dragging this down. You can kind of catch it there. Below that would be all my audio tracks. And definitely right now, I do not need audio tracks. So I'm going to go ahead and make this track a little bit larger. And you can see that when I do that, it kind of allows me to pop up it includes this line. And it also includes visual previews of all of the frames that you would be sort of cutting on, which is kind of nice. So let me go ahead and now show you sort of the magic of tracks. Before I do that, I will just give this person, it's not a person, it's a video, this video more real estate. So now this video has a little room too. So if I take this pen tool here, I can set up a node on this line, and then I can set up another node here, and I can drag it down. And you can basically kind of tune your own transition, which is super fun. So let's take a look at that. And then maybe I'll even come in here and make it so that it doesn't really pop up until the end. Okay, so now let's take a look at how this works out. It will be different. Yeah. So you can do lots and lots of super fun stuff with the idea of kind of a multi-track layering. The other thing that you can do with any kind of multi-track situation is you can take one of these clips, which I'll go ahead and just give this one a little more screen time by lifting this up. You could take this clip and you could go over to the Effect Controls tab over here. And you want to fly open the sort of opacity situation. So right now, by the way, we're not going to be able to preview any of these changes because the playhead is not over the, now that the playhead is over it, we can see the changes. But under blend mode, you will find, oh my God, it's like the software is made by the same company. These are all of the Photoshop blending modes that you can use in Premiere on video, which is awesome. So maybe I'll try like an overlay mode or something. Yeah. So now I'm definitely feeling impending apocalypse. So yeah. So that's another great sort of technique for dealing with video in Premiere. It looks like we only have a few short minutes left today. I'm trying to think about what I might want to show you next. Well, one thing that you can do, which is another useful tool, when you have the Move tool selected, we already looked at the sort of Cut tool, right? Which is going to allow you the opportunity to make cuts in the video. And then you can discard chunks or whatever. You can also take a chunk of video that you've cut, and if I go to the Move tool, I'm going to go back here. We cut the end of this video off, remember? We kind of like just chopped it off and said, get out of here. So if I use this thing called the Ripple Edit tool, which it automatically comes up when you hover around the end of a clip, if that clip has more to it back in the assets browser, you can actually just kind of make that clip longer. It's sort of like magic, but not really. So it basically just buys you, whatever you threw away, right? It's in some ways it's a little bit like the history tool in Photoshop, but it just lets you kind of recover that stuff from the asset browser. So before we sort of leave today, I want to look at something really important that happened at the beginning that I didn't really talk about. So that really important thing was that when we put this video into this project, we created a sequence. And I did talk about that. I talked about the sequence itself and what a sequence was. But what you definitely want to be aware of, or at least just check on, at least once during your project, preferably at the beginning, because it's difficult to recover if it's messed up and you've done your entire project. It's a good idea to go in here to sequence settings and double check a couple of things. So this video checks out. This video is 1920 by 1080. That's 1080p. Oh, good. That's exactly what we wanted because I used the, approved clip. Especially if you're using outside video clips, I would double check the sequence settings just to make sure. Because like in Photoshop, you can imagine that if your video is not the right pixel size, how would you go about changing it? And the answer, unfortunately, is that if you have a 720p video and you want to change it to 4K or 1080p, good luck. You're not gonna be able to sort of invent those pixels out of the air, and if you do, it's gonna look kind of ooky and resampled. Just like we had that experience in Photoshop, it's the exact same sort of experience with video. So definitely early on in your project, making sure that your video size is correct is really good. This display format doesn't actually really matter that much because in the we could change that to 30 frames a second. I mean, that would be nice. But if it's not 30 frames a second, that's something that you can change in the export settings. But it's better to change it here. So yeah, this is all great. The main thing is just to make sure that your size is exactly what you expect. And so I think with that, I think we've kind of gotten started. Next class, we're going to talk a little bit more about sort of multi-tracking, layering. We'll talk about transitions. At some point, we're going to do titles, because every video needs a My Stupid Project title. And yeah, we're going to just sort of flesh out, all of the different things you can do in Premiere. So have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Don't forget to save your project.